Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have a early impression video on a perfume house which has gotten little play on my channel. I've done one review. I still have a couple other videos I want to do from a couple of their other older fragrances which I have not had a chance to discuss. And this is from the house of Aton Perfumes, and this is called Animalia, which I kind of like the name, Animalia. And if you guys are familiar with the house of Aton Perfumes, he is the younger stepbrother of Russian Adam, okay? So I feel like he's always going to be kind of in the shadow of his older, more successful stepbrother. Although, you know what I want to see out of this? I want to see growth. I want to see him improving as a perfumer. And, one thing about improvements is you have to take criticism, right? And last time I reviewed one of his fragrances, Roxbury, which I really, really liked Roxbury. In fact, that would be a full bottle if money was no issue to me. And actually, this is up there with my favorite Aton perfumes. Probably the ones that I was least excited about were Patchouli Lauve and the Bright Lights, but I'll still review those on the channel because I still think they're good fragrances. They're not bad. They were $190 for 53 mil. Roxbury was $250 for 53 mil. Now we've moved up to Animalia, which is $170 for 30 mil. Okay, so the bottle has shrunk a little bit. And I'll tell you what they say about it. So basically, they say that this fragrance is different from other creations we have. We've used Animalic's Contracted with a sparkly opening featuring green apple accord. Playful champaca resides in the heart. The base notes are full of rare spices, resins, and dry woods. Deep green and soothing hay note gives a mysterious and long-lasting foundation. Okay, so that's the blurb. Ingredients say cedar, animalics, patchouli, vetiver, resins, rare spices, hay, moss, apple, champaca, and bergamot. 30 mils again for $170. So my beef about when I did my original Aton video on Roxbury, I said that the sprayers were shit, and they are, and they still are. You know, he needs to get better samples, in my personal opinion, because it just kind of like, like squirts on you. And sometimes it comes out of the side here. It doesn't always make it out of the front. Not a plan. Not a fan, I should say, of these little samples. Excuse me. I understand that they kind of seal up tight and they don't leak in transit, but there's a lot of samples out there that I think are much better that also don't leak. Maybe they're a little bit more expensive. I don't know. But anyways, that's just a little nitpicky, I understand. But, you have to be able to take criticism if you're going to improve. And I think that this is a young gentleman who is kind of on the upswing with his brand. I think he has a bright future if he continues down this path. So, obviously, with a name like Animalia, you expect a big animalic opening, right? Well, sort of. I mean, it's not a big in-your-face, bold. This is not Koros, okay? Definitely is not Furio by Jacques Bogart or anything like that. You do get a little bit of the civet. My guess is that it's not as animalic as the name makes it sound. Let's put it that way. So when you first spray this, and by the way, I have an 8-hour dry down here, and I have about a half an hour maybe spray that I just did. You can almost still see the oil on my hand. And look at the color of the juice, by the way. And that's a good representation of what the fragrance smells like. We'll talk a little bit about that. So it does open up animalic, but not as animalic as I was expecting. I was bracing for something heavier and stronger. It's not that. It is sort of a fragrance where you get hints of different animalics in the opening. My guess is civet and hyrax. Those are my two, hyraceum. Those are my two guesses, okay? But I don't know that for sure because they don't actually list what the animalic notes are. Doesn't smell like heavy castoreum or anything like that. Doesn't have the metallic leathery twang of castoreum. It smells more like civet or maybe hyrax. And it's set against this green background, okay? And there's multiple green notes that have interplay in here. There's a big dose of oak moss. And if you look, there's this mossy feel to the fragrance, this foresty, mossy feel. Even from the very beginning, I think you'll kind of get that. You'll also get patchouli in the beginning, which we'll talk some more about later, and what they say are resins, which has a misspelling on the website, under the ingredients. R-E-S-I-G-N-S. There's no G in resins. So resins, rare spices, hay, moss, apple, champaca, and bergamot. And so in the beginning, I must admit, I do feel that it's blended quite nicely for what it is, and I do feel like that kind of shows the growth of Aton as the perfumer, because he is a self-taught perfumer, just like Russian Adam, and I'm sure Russian Adam is taking him under his wing and giving him many tricks of the trade and stuff like that. Roxbury had one of the most beautiful aged patchouli notes I think I've ever smelled, and I've smelled the actual aged patchouli that goes in there. It's a beautiful, beautiful ingredient, fantastic. Crazy how one ingredient 24 years later could smell so different. Here, there's this very deep green, as they say in the blurb. You can smell the deep green feel, but it's contrasted with this sparkly bergamot and green apple. Okay, and so the improvement here in the opening definitely shows. You can see that that sparkly green apple note smells a little bit like, almost like a green apple Kool-Aid, but imagine you took green apple Kool-Aid and put in some Sprite or something to add a little bit of that sparkliness, right? A little bit of that fizziness. It's definitely here. And along with that sort of Sprite green appleness is that mossy forest floor smell. So just imagine, here's the image of this fragrance. This is maybe the best way I can describe it for you, because I've only worn this once today, okay? So this is my scent of the day. I've been wearing it today, like I said, but I'm no expert with this. I don't own a bottle. It's their brand new fragrance for 2024. And the idea of this fragrance, I want you to just imagine this very woody, mysterious forest. So almost like a forest covered in shadows by the canopy. Just imagine the trees are so big that the leaves are so sort of prominent that they create this canopy. And the light that does shine through just shines through in little shadows. And the forest gives off this very mysterious feel where just very little light gets through. And because very little light gets through, things like mosses really thrive in this area, right? There's a lot of undergrowth. There's a lot of that sort of untouched forest ground where whenever you walk along, things get kicked up, you know, areas of the forest that haven't been disturbed in many, many months get, you know, if you walk along those paths, you know, you have to kind of step on leaves or move them out of the way. And you see lots of mosses and funguses and stuff like that growing underneath, right? Underneath this canopy, almost like a little bit of a greenhouse for these type of dark green scents. And there's a vintage feel to that, by the way. If you like the dark green feeling, that foresty feeling of the old school masculines from the 70s and 80s, definitely one to put on your to sniff list. And this mystery, if you will, on one hand, is also wrapped by, or contrasted, I should say, by that playful green apple. Now, he actually says the champaca note is playful in here, but I've always found a fruity green apple note to be much more playful. It almost, you know, makes the fragrance smell less somber and less serious. You know, like maybe you're walking through the woods and your children are kind of running around, or you know, your child and your child's friend are running around and sort of playing in the woods, and you're just taking a nice stroll through the woods, through this area, through this dark, and the fragrance transitions, I would say, from dark to light is what I actually really like about the way that the fragrance breaks down in the first couple hours, especially 2-3 hours in. It starts off very dark, like you're in this forest, it's covered, you can't really see very much light shining through, and that green apple accord adds the playfulness, and the fragrance basically shifts, it transitions a little bit, and it goes from dark to light. And what I mean is, maybe not full-on sunshine, but just imagine like you're stepping out of that canopied forest, right? And you're stepping into what would be sunshine, but maybe it's a cloudy day, right? And you step into this clearing in the path. And the mystery of the forest is kind of left behind. You can still see it. You can still feel. You can almost still smell the damp darkness from that forest in your nostrils when you breathe in deep, because it's just right behind you, right? You've just stepped out of this forest and entered this clearing. And in the clearing, you find yourself standing in a field of golden hay, okay? And the golden hay is literally represented by a hay note. And it's a very well done hay note. It's a note that I absolutely love. I never realized how close hay and tobacco were to each other until I really got into perfumes. And the hay note in here has this very dry. Just imagine like every step of the way that dry hay is almost like crinkled up. You know how hay can sometimes be like so dry that when you step on it, it almost seems to just like disintegrate. And also as it disintegrates, maybe particles are like thrown up into the air, or maybe like every time you take a step in this hay forest, this hay field, bugs kind of jump out and you see the particles come up into the air. And when you smell those particles, it almost smells like you're smelling a tobacco, okay? And there's definitely a little bit of that. And by now, let's say an hour in, okay, the animalics have not completely subsided, but they've really taken a back seat to the already back seat that they took. I thought with a name like Animalia, this was going to be something that really scratched my itch, for Russian Atom style creations with lots of heavy animalics and stuff like that. And I will say this, if you blindfolded me and let me sniff this, and you said, Ramsey, there's an oud note in here. What type of oud is it? I would guess maybe there's some sort of like Moroccan oud, maybe some sort of that spicy, earthy, one of those oud trees that fell underground and they had to like dig it up because it was like buried under the soil for millennia kind of thing. It has that underground rootiness to it. But there's no oud note listed, but it does have a little bit of that feel, if that makes sense. And it does feel very well blended the first 2 or 3 hours. And as it settles, you almost get this tobacco, but imagine tobacco being combined with this caramelized, warm, sort of golden smell, okay? And that golden smell, even though you're in, it's not golden sunshine, but if you just close your eyes and you imagine the field that you're standing in is sort of covered in golden sunshine, that will give you this this idea. Just imagine you're standing on a cloudy day, but you're standing in this field and you were thinking, man, if it was a sunny day, that golden hay would really shine, and you can just close your eyes and you can see what the day would look like. But it's not, it's not. It's a cloudy day. And so you get hints of spices that blend with the caramelized, this very caramelized, honey-like nectar floral smell. And it's mixed with this animalic, sort of spicy, musty floral, right? And that floral note that you're smelling is basically the champaka that he referenced in his little write-up, that playful champaka, as he says, that resides in the heart. And one thing I should mention that's very important, especially in the opening, and as I reapplied it, I got it again, and I get it for the first 2 or 3 hours, the patchouli in this release. And I can really tell that Aton really likes patchouli because of what he did with his Roxbury release. He also has a patchouli lave, and patchouli is one of my favorite ingredients. I love patchouli, especially when it's done proper. And Roxbury is a very interesting take on sort of that patchouli that's aged is the best way to put it. It's like an aged patchouli. Even though they aged it in a camel leather, it brings a little different take to the patchouli world. And the patchouli here feels chocolatey. To my nose, that's the best way to describe it. I think it has like this chocolatey earthiness. And when you think about that deep green, mossy, oak mossy smell, I mean, look at the color of the juice again. That's a great sort of representation of what the fragrance smells like on your skin. This deep green, earthy, mossy, and just imagine that earthy patchouli blending in with that, but being chocolatey, okay? So there's a little bit of a chocolatey aspect to it. And maybe that's also why I'm thinking oud, because there's a lot of like chocolate oud combinations. But it just smells like they use the word, deep in this, deep and green. And there's definitely something that crinkly hay, that deep green forest-like smell, and then you add that chocolatey patchouli, which I can tell Aton really likes using patchouli in his creations. And here, the chocolatey patchouli jumps out almost instantly. I was so focused on the animalics the first time around, trying to smell what type of animalics he was using because of the name, that I think that chocolatey patchouli almost jumps out and overtakes any of the animalic notes as far as that opening goes. There are animalics. I don't want to give the sense that there's not. And the other thing you have to remember about me is that I have a very high tolerance for animalics, okay? So you may smell this and go, oh my God, I can't believe Ramsey said that's not animalic. It just doesn't have the big, bold animalic like burst, like I was expecting. The animalics are blended into everything, if that makes sense. And it feels very well blended for the first couple hours, 2 or 3 hours. And the reason I keep saying it feels very well blended for the first couple hours is there is something that I got on my skin. Now, again, this is one testing, so I don't think it's fair to, this is an early impression video. Keep that in mind. But for some reason, that chocolatey patchouli turns to something that smelled slightly chemical smelling as the dry down went into hour 4, 5, and 6. And that chemical, almost floor cleaner smelled like it was coming from the patchouli for some reason. I couldn't think of where else it would come from. The patchouli is sort of my best guess. Obviously, there are woody notes as well. There's a cedar note in here, which I think makes up that forest imagery, if you will. It's very, very traditionally masculine fragrance, I think. Even though I think it's marketed unisex, I think it's a very masculine release. Very vintage old school, if that makes sense. But that chemical bit, two things I would say are negatives for me. Number one, the animalics aren't what I would expect from a name like Animalia. And number two, that patchouli that turns from a beautiful chocolate as the hours go by, it starts feeling like a little like floor cleaner on my skin. And I didn't really care for that. Also, I would say by hour 6, 7, it feels very, very light, very, very low projection. It feels really close to the skin, which if you're using very high quality materials, you would think they would be lasting longer than just 6 or 7 hours. But to be fair, the first 3 or 4 hours are beautiful. And all of the good things I said about it hold true. This is probably one of my favorite Aton perfumes. If you said, Ramsey, pick two. You get two, it would be this and Roxbury. Roxbury would be my... Roxbury's probably my favorite still, just because that aged patchouli is so beautiful in there. And you get 53 mils instead of 30, like with Animalia. But Animalia is still one of his better releases. But I'll also review the Bright Lights and Patchouli Lave one of these days. But if you have experience with this house, let me know. I think it's a brand that is up and coming. I think that I'm pretty sure that Aton is a pretty young gentleman. I think he's a young chap. So I think he still has a lot of growth to potentially do. And I think if he stays with it, yeah, he's 21 years old, according to the blurb. Maybe that was a year or two old, so maybe he's in his early 20s right now. But for someone in his early 20s to make something like this, I'm impressed. I really am. It's powerful to do something like this. So yes, he says, I have so much feelings, but I don't know how to express them. So here it is. Here's how you can express those type of feelings. And I think it's worth a sample. For you folks who like the indie perfumes, I would say, if you're someone who likes fragrances like Prin Lomros's fragrances or those type of perfumes, this falls more into a category of Prin than it does Russian Atom's work, if that makes sense. It doesn't have, if Russian Atom released a fragrance called Animalia, you would expect it to be huge animalics, bold, assertive, in your face, challenging. This is more, it's blended, it's part of the blend. I like the smell. I've enjoyed wearing it today. Would I spend $170 on a bottle? I don't think I personally would. But I really enjoyed getting to know it. If you have any experience with the brand of Aton, let me know. If you're interested in sampling Animalia, let me know your thoughts. I will say that, that sparkly green apple thing in the opening, mixed with the chocolatey patchouli, the dry woods, the cedars, the resins, the hay, and who knows what kind of spices are being used in here. I wish he gave more specifics. I would like to know which animalics were used. I would like to know which spices were used. I would like to know if it's nutmeg or cinnamon. I would like to know all those details, And so my advice would be change these damn samples, number one, and number two, have a little bit more description. Say more about it. It's interesting because even as a seasoned nose, you smell this. If I smell this blind, I'm going, what is in here? Is there oud? Is there tobacco? Is there? And then you look and there's no oud, but there is hay. And so you go, okay, it's a hay note. Sometimes you have to, you can infer certain things, no matter how experienced you are. They say that the human nose can only pick up 3 or 4 notes at any one time. So if there's like a 20 note fragrance, you have to focus on certain things and pay attention to how it evolves and all that stuff. And certain notes come in different versions of the dry down. Someone was left a comment on one of my early videos talking about the arc of the dry down, how many master perfumers set themselves apart from the amateurs, from the self-taught perfumers, because of that arc and how fragrances, different fragrance notes evaporate on your skin and how it all comes together. And maybe that sort of chemical smell in the late dry down here, 4, 5, 6 hours in, with more experience, that's something that Aton can sort of work on mitigating with other notes, or by the way things are mixed. I don't know. I'm not a perfumer. I'm just some guy who loves perfume. So, but I wanted to bring this to your attention because this is their new release for 2024. It's not even up on Parfumo yet. It is on his website though, so you can go to atonperfumes.com and add it to the cart there if you're interested. I don't know if it's a limited edition. I'm not sure why the smaller bottle or what's going on, but if there is some feedback, Aton, that more about Animalia that you can tell us, leave it in the comment and I'll pin it to the video so more people can learn about it. But yes, very interesting. Thank you for sending this sample to me. Really enjoyed getting to know it. And I'll review the other 2 from your brand one of these days. It is on the never-ending review list. Okay, so Patchouli Lave and the Bright Lights will get the Bright Lights will be in the spotlight one of these days. So anyways, thanks for watching, everybody. Appreciate the support. Cheers, guys, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.